Hello, everyone. My name is Katy from Greenland Quilter, and I have my friend Ellen, and I'm going to turn it over to her. So, Ellen, tell us a little bit about yourself and about what the name of your channel is, and then I'll start asking questions after that.
Okay, my name is Ellen Pankey, and my channel is Qaqortoq Traditions. It's spelled kind of funny, Traditionz, because they're unnormal traditions. And my channel was started because I have been alive for 8 generations. There are currently 6 living generations. My mom is in her up there in her 90s. She'll choke me if I tell her age. And she watches my show sometimes and busts my chops. And what I talk about, what the GQuat stands for, is garden, quilt, and art traditions. And I do all of those things, plus cook from scratch, all the old fashioned things, canning, preserving, and I'm a mixed media artist. I became one after I retired because I've worked since I was 15, 16. Then after I retired, I had time for art. And it's funny because when I got in my first art show, my mother said, "What is all this artist BS, all that years we sent you to school?" But some of my pieces, one of my friends worked for a major international art organization, and they saw my work and hosted me as one of the featured artists, and the rest is history.
Oh, nice. So, who was your main influence for learning to sew?
Girl Scouts and Brownies in the United States.
Okay.
My grandmothers always sewed. My maternal grandmother was like our nanny. My mother had 6 kids. She got married when she was 17, and by the time she was 27, she had 6 of us.
Mm-hmm.
So my grandmother babysat. We weren't allowed to go to strangers' homes or, strange people around us. My dad was very strict, very old fashioned. My grandmother moved from Pennsylvania to Connecticut to take care of us. And my other grandmother lived in North Carolina, and we went down there for the summer. She used to make quilts.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to make stuff. I've been sewing, not quilts, but I've been crocheting, knitting, embroidery, needlepoint since I was like 4 or 5 years old. And how do I know that? Because I was doing it before I started school. And when I started school, I couldn't do it so much anymore until I became old enough to go to Brownies because my job was to get a good education because my parents didn't have that opportunity.
Mm-hmm. So are you the first generation of going to college?
Yes.
I'm a first generation on both sides of my family too of going to college.
Yes. Well, when I look at my dad's family history, I went to Howard University in Washington, D.C., and Pankey, Pankey, is such a huge name, a weird name, that they looked in the book. And in the book, inside the book, there were Pankeys in 1895.
Oh, nice.
So anybody with that name is related, whether they're black or white,
Yep.
they're related. My dad is from the South, so on both sides there are Pankeys. My mother's family history goes back to the 1700s, where her great 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 grandfather moved to the United States. And her side of the family, he married a Native American. There were not a lot of women to marry, like just sitting around, hey, dude, you came from Ireland, whatever. So he married a Native American. Well,
Hmm.
during that part of history in the United States, if you married a Native American, there was no such thing as marrying black people. There was not even any slave. Well, I guess there was slavery because it started in 1619. So
Hmm.
you were listed as mulatto. So my mother's great great grandfather had married and had these children, but the children were always free. My great great grandmother during the 1700s and 1800s, it's a funny story. I was going through Ancestry, and I know that all my mother's family is very fair. Her grandfather has blue eyes. All the grandfathers before that had blue eyes. When we went to Pennsylvania, it was like, how come we're the only ones with brown skin? So my nickname is Penny. So going back to then, I was like the first brown skin baby in that part of the family. So
Wow.
then I'm going back through Ancestry, and I get to like 1834 when her grandmother was born. And it said Amanda Thomas. Well, Thomas is a common name, it's a common Dutch name. They were
Yeah.
Dutch. And she married somebody named Thomas. It ended up being like way back then, two cousins, distant cousins, married each other. They had the same last name, but their grandfathers or something had come from the UK. So when I'm looking on Ancestry and all these pictures start popping up, everybody had blonde hair and blue eyes. I'm like, wait a minute, and straight noses. And I'm like, okay, I see where the other noses came from the Native American side. In fact, my mother's grandmother is full blooded Native American. So when I looked at them, then when I was saying, okay, they moved from Virginia to Pennsylvania, and my great great grandfather bought a coal mine and 400 acres. I'm like, oh, now wait a minute. I know a little bit about history. I'm like, the Civil War didn't end until 1863. So what the heck? How did they get to Pennsylvania? Did Harriet Tubman bring them? What happened? How did they get there? So what it turns out is that they were free. They were all free. I'm doing the research. I'm writing a book about the family history of the Thomases because they were never enslaved, ever, ever, ever. So when the Civil War started, they moved from Virginia to Pennsylvania, and her great grandfather fought in the Civil War with General George Washington. And as part of his compensation, whatever, he was able to buy the 400 acres of land that became a walk in coal mine.
Hmm.
And at some point, that land was sold to the Jewish cemetery, but the part where the Thomases are buried is a registered historic landmark. You can Google it. And the state of Pennsylvania has done all the research, and my mom's dad is buried there, and all the grandfathers. So that I forgot what the original question was, all about my grandmothers, but they always embroidered and did the needlepoint and stuff from the, I guess, the English side.
Okay. When did you begin to piece quilts and how long have you been doing it?
Well, I accidentally pieced some quilts, I guess, in my 50s, but I had these big jobs and these big corporations. I worked all the time. I never had time for that during my working years. So in 1999, I moved back to Connecticut. My dad had a traumatic brain injury, and my mother wanted a quilt. Well, I made really good money then. I had been a senior corporate paralegal for 20 years. Then I went back to school and I got an MBA, a master's in business administration, and I went to law school for 2 years. When my dad was injured, I moved back to Connecticut, and I moved in the family house. It's one of them big old historic houses with 9 bedrooms and 6 bathrooms. I couldn't find anybody to make a quilt. There was another quilter named Jonathan, whose mother was from New Hampshire, and he used to have the coolest quilts. I used to wonder how they used to get the circles in there and
Yeah.
all these geometric shapes, and he would have them on his door and whatnot. So my mother, I couldn't find anybody to make a quilt, not even for a couple $1,000s. So I met a lady. I started doing some volunteer work in a community center. And I met this lady taking my students back and forth who was a quilter. And I purchased some blocks. They were 9 patches, not even very well done. And she invited me over and showed me how to piece them together, the blocks together, put sashing in and whatnot. So after that, I started taking lessons and lessons and lessons. But I've been sewing since I was like 7 or 8. But I sewed by hand. I made my first skirts. High school, Daddy bought us sewing machines, and I used to make all my clothes. But it was when I was it wasn't that long ago, 25 years ago, when I started quilting.
Nice. Um, how, so
Piecework, patchwork.
what are your favorite genres of fabric?
My favorite genres are batiks and African fabrics.
I love batiks. I'm so in love.
I have that's all I buy now.
Yeah.
Why? Because for 50 years I bought standard American fabrics. I bought everything, Civil War fabrics, that were the muted colors. I bought what do you call the fabric that they couldn't, the only kind they homespun. I have homespun collections of homespun. I had muslin, which is all the poor people could afford to use for backing and for sashing and stuff like
Yeah.
that back in the day. And that's all I ever saw. My grandmother from North Carolina's quilts.
Yeah. My grandmother's quilts had old blankets in the middle for batting, and one side probably had feed sack fabric because they lived in Alabama, and she was raising 13 kids, and they were both cotton pickers, so they were very poor.
My dad's parents were sharecroppers, and he said that he picked cotton when he was little, but later when we used to go down, it was tobacco. I have a little thing that I made that I use for a stand for my computer,
Mhm.
and it's actually a vintage piece of feed sack. I
Oh,
collected
nice.
I have a few of those. Yeah.
Yeah, because I didn't know what feed sack fabric was until all this discussion comes across. Because a lot of times you see people talking about it, in quilting and stuff, and I didn't know that that was a thing. And I have a quilt that's at least 150 years old, and I'm pretty sure
Nice.
it's feed sack, and it's dying on me. It came from my grandmother, so it's sad, but there's nothing I can do about it because it's been well used.
My I guess my grandfather in Pennsylvania was rich comparatively speaking. Coal miners made a lot of money, and he had hogs and all this stuff in Pennsylvania. But my mom said that my grandmother, the one that I knew, used to bleach the feed sacks and then embroider them and crochet them for
Ooh.
pillowcases.
Oh, that's
And they used
awesome.
to, she told me about people sticking old coats, old blankets, and even straw in the quilts, whatever they had. And in North Carolina, the county that I lived in, there were a lot of poor people. I started volunteering at the senior center, and some of them had quilts with cotton after the cotton gin went by, and I
Mhm.
guess cotton ripened later or whatever was left in the fields, and they go get it. Some of the quilts still had the seeds in
Yeah.
the cotton in the quilts.
Yep, that makes sense. Okay, do you have who is your favorite designer? Sorry, let me try that again. Who is your favorite pattern designer?
Me,
Yeah, see, I don't have a favorite one either.
I
Okay.
actually had the software where you could bring up your own, make your own patterns, whatever. I like improvisational patterns where I just make them up as I
Yep.
go or do something or see something I like and then try to recreate it.
Yep. Um, uh, do you prefer traditional over modern, or do you lean in the middle of it?
I'm in the middle.
Yeah, I want to make a modern quilt. I mean, I think my Stronger Together is pretty close to it, to a modern one, but the one from last year for sure. So I really think it's cool. Um, as a quilter, is there anything that you had learned that you wish someone had told you in the beginning?
No, it hasn't been invented yet. You know, like after 25 years and classes and guilds. Oh, you can't see this. So this is IDs from two of my quilt guilds. This one is the Gaston Lake Peacemakers Guild.
Mm-hmm.
It's a guild in North Carolina on the lake where you where they were advanced, it's super advanced quilters in these $1 million houses that you'd go visit and go sit around and do extra stuff. Everybody had an embroidery machine, a long arm machine, and then the other is from the Long Arm Association, which was a considerable investment, and everybody didn't have one. So, teaching quilting, I learned how to do a lot, just about everything. Now, there are new tools, there are new ways of doing them, but I just about know how to do everything there is in quilting.
Okay, I'm going to
Okay.
share the screen here so that we can talk about the quilts you sent to me, and then we'll continue on with questions. So hold on a second while I fix this. Here we go. Okay, are you able to see this okay?
Yes,
Okay, can you tell me about this quilt?
yes. That is one of my favorite quilts. It is in purple, as you see. It was a really nice batik in the background, one of the most expensive fabrics I had ever bought at that time. And the pattern is called Crazy Eight Stars. Each each star in this quilt of the 12 quilts are different.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I was in a group of 12 women. I had to be juried in to even join this group of master quilters. And in the corner, you see I pieced a little corner, the cornerstones were even pieced. I put a fabric that was kind of gold and it had dragonflies in it. That's
Mm-hmm.
the background. And then I found a purple batik that I put on the outside. Well, I was one of the last persons joining that group, and they finally let me in. And there was a quilt show coming up, so I didn't have time to quilt to do anything on it myself. I didn't have a long arm machine at that time, and I found a long arm quilter in outside of Raleigh in Cary. I don't know if you know where Cary, North Carolina is. It's
No.
one of the wealthiest sections of North Carolina. And I drove about an hour, hour and a half down there and told her what I wanted. This it's custom quilted. It has piano keys on the edges. I didn't know that was considered custom quilting. I'm thinking that I don't know what I thought, but I'll tell you what, the I paid over $1,000, 1,000 for the quilting on this quilt.
Wow.
I'm like, what the what? And of course, I had to put a deposit to leave the quilt. I wanted my quilt after all this work, and I'm like, oh no, they're making all that money. I want in, buddy. I'm buying me a machine. I'm gonna finish my own quilts. I'm never paying that much money to finish another quilt. And
Crazy.
I have that quilt, but it's all folded up and stored away, and I need help to get it down. It's one that I keep for quilt shows.
Okay. So let's move to the next one. Tell me about this one.
Oh, that one is called a scrappy 9 patch. I think you would love this one, Katie,
Yeah,
because it's made with 2.5 inch squares and it's scrappy. It's totally scrappy.
it's
It was made
beautiful.
out of the bits and pieces of myself and one of my friends in North Carolina who was Native American, and they're all mismatched. Such a a hodgepodge of colors. And she wanted to do this thing where we put all the pieces in a brown paper sack
Hmm.
and just randomly pulled them up and put them together. Well, I made several quilts. This was the third one, and I'm never going to make another one. It was 2,500 pieces. I sold one that was orange and browns and, organized colors together. This one I gave to my aunt. I sent it to a long arm quilter, and she still hasn't even opened it yet. So I took this picture out when I was looking for something for you this morning, and I sent her the picture and said, "Oh, Auntie, by the way, this is the quilt that you never opened and even looked at. And you see how big it is? That's an
That's big.
8 foot couch over there."
Hmm. It's beautiful. Okay, the next one is the quilting. You want to talk about that?
That is the hand quilt, the hand guided quilting on the back of that same quilt. Another one of my friends was a long arm quilter in the Quilt Guild in North Carolina, and I gave her a quilt top in exchange for her hand quilting this with her machine on her fancy gamma. But she handed this one for me.
Okay, and then we have this one. You want to talk about that one?
Yes, this was my first quilt with African American fabric. I think it was about 2003, 2005. I had moved to North Carolina, and one of my friends that I was just talking about that we did the previous quilt with was Native American, and she gave me a little package of 5 inch charm squares,
Hmm.
and some of it she'd gotten from a place in North Carolina called the French Connection, where she goes back to some country in Africa. She's a white lady, her and her husband. I think her husband is French, and they buy all this fabric and bring it back to North Carolina. She has a really nice quilt shop, and she sells pre-cuts. I don't didn't buy pre-cuts, so my friend gave me these, and I mixed them with some Kona black, and I made this quilt for my daughter. Then I pieced it with that orange African-y looking fabric, or maybe it
Hmm.
was African. I don't remember in the back. And then my daughter found the pillows and made it for her bed.
It's
I never seen
beautiful.
that quilt. I don't know what she did with it.
It's gorgeous. Okay, so we'll go back to asking questions now. All right. Um, Tell me about what you envisioned in the beginning of your quilt process, and has it evolved since then? Or how has it evolved since then? When you first started out versus now?
Okay, when I first started, it was all, it's like book learning. I was in these fancy quilt guilds, and every month, like the one quilt guild, there were 12 of us. I was the only African American person in this guild, and we put our names in a hat and we each pulled a month. So each month, the person would find a quilt pattern, and then all 12 of us would make the pattern in whatever fabrics we wanted. And it was amazing that it was kind of like your mandala in the back, that 12 people made the same quilt and none of them looked
Yeah,
alike. None of
exactly.
them looked alike. So that was exciting for me. And but I wanted to learn all. Back here are just books and books and books and books of different quilt patterns that I bought over the years, and over figure 25 years, a book a month. I belong to all the American Quilter Society, all the different quilt guilds. Pat Sloan is one of the oldest, biggest guilds on Facebook. I've done a couple, like you do, quilt alongs,
Mhm.
where or mystery quilts, and I just wanted to learn everything there was about quilting.
Uh, what do you like best about making a quilt? What do you love doing the most? The piecing or the quilting or the binding?
I'm glad you asked that, Katie. I want to show you something.
That's beautiful. I'm gonna
Oh,
ask
oh,
about it.
what I'm trying to show you is like in back of that art quilt are four large hampers. Guess
Oh,
guess what they're full of?
quilt tops? Quilt,
Finished fancy quilt tops.
nice.
60 of them.
60.
Finish that 60.
Wow.
So I don't have a long arm anymore. So every quilt's $200 or $300 to send it to a long arm quilter, get it finished, sent back. But I don't even like it. I bought a long arm machine to finish my own quilts. Then I couldn't for the last 10 years. And I just kept going. I like picking the fabric. I like putting it together, touching it. I could give a rat's patootie over when it gets finished. I don't even care. If somebody pays for a quilt or they see me on a channel doing it, I'll send it to the long armor, hurry up and get it out to them and go on to the next one. But I like designing them and finding the colors.
That's great. What is your favorite type of quilt to make? Applique, pieced, or whole cloth?
Pieced.
Okay. What is the hardest thing about creating a quilt from your perspective?
Finding colors that coordinate. Like I brought some things to show and tell because I know that you buy the pre-cuts. Oh, here it is.
I only participate in just the PMQ. Everything else I buy in yardage.
I do too. And these were some of the yardage from I like connecting threads is one of the ones that I buy. And so I bought a yard of each one of these. And then some of my friends would buy a yard. So
Mhm.
we would save up, and then once a year we'd go by when these boutiques were on sale. We'd buy a yard and then cut it in half. Why cut it in half? Because out of that half yard, you could make two fat quarters.
Mhm.
And then we would trade. We would make color schemes and then trade with each other or just sell them.
Yeah.
And then the other bunch I would make, like I make a lot of blocks that need 6.5 inch squares. So these are 6.5 inch strips. I would
Okay.
make another set of strips with 8.5 inch. Yes. So then I have like all these color palettes just waiting, Katie.
How many quilts have you made or do you have?
Oh my gosh. I I have about 30 in my exhibit collection. There are 60 in the bookcases in back of me waiting to be finished. I have about 25, 30 UFOs.
Oh my gosh, that's a
I
lot.
have, yes, but what I do now in between in between quilts, and then all the quilts that I make matching pillowcases
Awesome.
because you can't buy the fabric, you can get them after that,
Yeah.
and it's a way of earning extra money. I sell them pretty pricey here in the US, and for like two king size pillowcases, I sell them with the quilt top.
That's a good idea, actually. Is it, I know you mentioned your grandmother and stuff, but is there anyone in your family besides yourself who makes quilts?
No, they
Okay.
don't. They don't put zippers in, Katie. They don't hem pants. What they do? Oh, Nana, can you do this? Or when I'm at the family house, whatever bed I sleep on, oh, Nana, can you do this? Oh, Nana. It's oh, Nana for 70 years.
Um, what is your go-to sewing machine?
My Singer Featherweight.
Okay. You didn't even hesitate on that one.
No.
Um, when did you start your YouTube channel and what were your goals at the beginning and how has that evolved over time?
Well, my YouTube channel, I started about 2 years ago.
Mhm.
I no, I had a YouTube channel 10 years ago because I was volunteering at a senior center in North Carolina, and I was teaching how to connect what do you call it, the 2.5 inch strips, and without sewing them. And somebody took a camera and put it on YouTube, but I never went back to it until about 3 years ago, and I was watching other people's videos.
Right.
Then I did something. It was a garden to tea challenge, and
Mhm.
I made my first video when I looked. And just this morning, when I was finding stuff for you, and it was in 2021, and I'm like, oh my god, that was the worst video. I was talking so formally and being trying to do the right thing.
Yeah, don't we all when we first start?
Oh my gosh. Now it's like slapped together, put
Yep.
together, reaching stuff.
Yeah, we don't have time to waste. That's right.
Yes.
What is your guilty pleasure? And it doesn't have to be quilting.
Baking.
What did you say?
Baking.
Baking.
Cooking.
Okay. All
Yes.
right.
Yes.
Um, Now what we're going to do is we're going to have a little fun and you have to think on your feet.
Okay.
What do you wish you had invented that relates to quilting?
Oh, quilting. I wish I had invented the embroidery machine.
Oh,
The
cool. Okay, what was your worst quilt disaster and were you able to solve it?
uh my worst quilt disaster was I was commissioned to make an art quilt. And the woman told me her favorite color was black. She gave me her son's dressing gown or baptismal gown in Connecticut. And she belonged to a group in Stamford, Connecticut. Well, Connecticut is predominantly white state, so there aren't a lot of black people, period. So this woman told me about uh, her colors. We had a meeting. She gave me a deposit. I required, when I take quilts and I do a commission quilt, I'd require half before I start because some people don't come back. One woman one time liked dragonflies that I met, and I bought this dragonfly fabric, 13 yards of it, that I
Wow,
paid for out of my pocket. I'm still using it. I never heard back from her. Never heard back from her.
that's not
So
good.
going back to the quilting disaster, I hand sewed, I appliqued this christening gown on here. Then I found some blue and white fabric. Her son had been a lifeguard or a surfer, and when you go to the beaches, when there is bad tide or bad weather,
To put a flag
I
up?
think your husband's a fisherman, the flag up, the whole thing. I included all of that in the quilt. So then I found some blue and white fabric that I used as backing. It was like zigzag, kind of modern fabric. And when she saw the quilt, now this was on the back and a little bit on the border.
Hmm.
Uh, the border was just perfect, hand sewn, everything. all this handwork. And when she looked at it, she said, "This is horrible." And
Uh-oh.
she sent me this one-page thing about what she expected and what the H was I doing anyway? Was this some type of voodoo? Voodoo? What? And I'm
Wow.
like, hey, she had talked to several of her friends and they had a meeting and they thought it was some type of, and I'm like, you know what? So I sent her a whole typewritten thing, what I was trying to do, the love that I put into it, how much time I spent in it. And I gave her $200 back. I had spent countless hours making on this, and it's beautiful. I still own the graphic, the photos of it. I was so hurt. I said, I don't want this woman bad mouthing me. I just moved back to Connecticut 10 years ago after waking up from the coma, starting my life over. And I didn't want her trashing me like to the different museums and art organizations. So I just let it go, let it go, let
Yeah,
it go.
I know the feeling. What is your favorite color and why?
Purple. I don't know. I must have been a queen in Madagascar in another lifetime. I don't know.
I love
Uh,
purple too, so join
Purple
the
is
club.
supposed to be the color of royalty in many countries, and only the kings, like in Thailand, or the royalty in different countries, could use purple. Prince Charles. I'm King Charles. Pardon me, sir. King Charles. Do you know some quilting trivia that I should have on another thing? He and I are born on the exact same day, the exact same year. But the big royal crown, the jewels, are the purple one.
Cool. All
There's
right.
crowns.
Okay, now here's one where you're going to have to give multiple answers. What
Yes.
5 skills should a beginner quilter learn to help them become a quilt maker, a good quilt maker as they learn? Five
One,
things.
a 1/4 inch seam. Number two, a seam ripper. Take that crap out if you messed up. Number three, number three, how to bind, how to miter a corner. That's all part of three. Number four, finish your own quilts. And number five, put a label on.
Huh, great advice. All right, now suggest 5 tools that every beginner quilter, eh, let me try that again. Suggest 5 tools that every beginner quilt maker should start out with and why.
Well, I mentioned one just now, seam ripper, because nothing is perfect and you're going to make mistakes. You can't be too proud to take them out. Number two, a tape measure.
Okay.
Most of us have rulers, but the tape measure, you can measure bendy things or things that go around,
Mhm.
things that are flexible. Number three, multiple ways of marking things,
Okay.
like pencil. It could be a pencil, pen, marker, something you can make your labels with. You can do it on unbleached muslin. You can print them out. You can embroider them, but you have to put that birth certificate on your quilt.
Yep.
Number four, more. Um, okay, number four, rotary cutter blades. Don't wear that. Don't use that puppy until it won't even cut butter, because a dull ruler will injure you.
Yep.
You will slip. Number four, you need a thick, proper ruler to use with your rotary cutter,
Mhm.
because thin rulers, the rotary cutter will jump over it. People have cut their fingers off, other things. And number five, invest in some good thread.
Yep. That's
Good
great.
thread.
Okay, so what advice could you give concerning how to take care of quilts to make them last a long time?
Number one, never store them in plastic. Do not put them in plastic bags. that you use the thing to suck the air out of and put in your fancy closet in your fancy house. Use an old pillowcase, use something cotton, fold it up, air it out every once in a while because the wrinkles will get in there permanently,
Yep.
especially if you live in a hot climate. Number two,
No, there's only one. It's
oh, I knew that.
you can give more than one if you want, though. Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say if you wash it in a machine, let it air dry. Don't try not to put them in the dryer and beat them up or whatever.
What do you think about using fabric softener? Because I've done some research because when you buy a fleece blanket,
Well,
when you buy a fleece blanket, um, after a period of time of washing and using fabric softener and drying it either in the dryer or on the line, you notice how it starts to mat. So I'm wondering if fabric softener over time wouldn't cause cotton quilts to degrade because of that.
I think that flannel and fleece, by virtue of the way they are made, they just wear down. I have a couple of very old memory quilts that I put flannel in. I
Hmm.
used one where my dad's old flannel shirts, and the parts that were flannel are worn all the way down to the batting. I had to actually patch over them.
Yeah. Okay.
To take a quick break
Okay.
because,
Let me pause. Okay.
okay,
Hold on. Let's go. Okay. Do you have any other advice that you would like to share with quilters, all quilters, and any skill level?
yes, enjoy it. Enjoy it. You know, it is something, some people get so stressed out. They're so trying to beat a timeline. They are trying to sell something. You forget to relax and enjoy touching the fabric, how it's going to look when it's together, picking it out. It's like having a new baby for the first time. You're so intent as a first mom, making sure the baby doesn't get colic or a diaper rash, whatever. By the second child, it's like, okay, oops, the passy fell. Wipe it off. Here you go. You, you know, you forget to have fun.
Okay. So now what we're going to do is I want you to, you brought some quilts to share with us, and I'm going to pin the window so that it's big. And you can go ahead and um, show your beautiful quilts.
Okay. So some of you have heard of a little twister ruler. It's one of the rulers that you use for making quilts, and you end up sewing a bunch of squares together. Usually it's a 5-inch square, like a charm square, because you can pre-buy them. I remember because my first one was a set of Moda pre-cuts that I bought at a trunk show or something just because they were beautiful. And I bought them, and and they come in two different sizes, a big ruler and a small one. And then you take all these squares that you've sewn together, you put this ruler on the fold, cut out all these little janky pieces,
Mhm.
sew them back together again. You could have make two quilts actually, and you end up with a quilt because you are in a group making a patriotic quilt in red, white, and blue. And I never make red,
Yeah,
white, and blue. I think
that's
I'll
beautiful.
do one of yours or try to show at least from the middle down.
Oh, look at that. That's really great.
And the back is red, white, and blue. I
So this
actually,
pieced on both sides?
actually no. This was just a little piece
Oh,
that, but I did. I'm like, why did I waste that good batik on over there for a hanging strip? Because I do put it on my door, and of course the sides, uh, the the
yep.
the rest is batik because I just love it.
It's
And I
beautiful.
quilted it in because I know that you will be quilting yours. So I took this one out. I quilted it in a stitch called meandering stars, where you just do like a basic meander, then do a 5 point stars, then echo quilt it and find another part and start another one. But this one, I'm really I really wanted to show you because this will, and I'll try to make sure it does not touch the ground because
Oh,
is it actually is
is the background batik also?
yes.
Oh, it's
All the
beautiful.
fabrics are batik. Every fabric in here is a batik. And what I'd like
I
you to
like
say
using
is
the
that
white batik
every
background.
stripe,
Oh, look at it. It's beautiful.
it's like 5 different white batiks,
Nice.
5 or 6 different red batiks.
Yep. You like
Or
doing when I do use different shades and hues of color.
actually, why don't I put this down so I don't have to hold my little rotator cuff arms up so fast? Even the flagpole is like a great batik.
Nice.
And like you can see the stars and stripes, like where
Yep.
each fabric was different and then put back together again.
That's really cool.
So, and then like all these different batik reds
Mhm.
in there. So it reminded me of what you guys were working on. So I really wanted to share this one.
That's beautiful.
And then one, it's kind of a modern. This one actually is kind of a modern quilt, and I did it for the last quilt show that was in North Carolina in 2014, and I finally remembered the name of the place where it was held. Duh, it was the Raleigh Convention Center. That
Oh my
place is
goodness.
huge.
Yeah, it
And
is.
I was co-chair of the vendor committee, and we partnered with my long arm group and our big Raleigh quilting group to give this show. And we each had to do a not each, but several of us did a quilt. It was a group project, and it was we selected the fabrics and they pre-cut it, and
Oh, look at
oh my
that.
it's called Thundering Tomahawks.
That
And,
does look like a modern quilt.
and it's Texas Stars.
Nice.
Um, Texas Stars. And it has a hanging sleeve. And there are all batiks, but they're all different colors. So
They're
we each
beautiful.
got the pre cut colorways. We used the little piece that was left over. I sewed mine together to make the piece binding.
Hmm.
Then because tomahawk seemed like type of a Native American thing, so I just put this feathered
Oh, I like that. That's pretty.
fabric on the back.
Nice.
And the last thing I want to show you was what your first question was going to be to me about my oldest quilt.
Yeah, I was very interested in the oldest one.
Okay, well, close your eyes and open your hand. No, look at this.
Look, oh my God. Ah, is that crochet on there too?
Yes, it's a crazy quilt, and
Wow.
it has pieces of my grandmother's crochet. It has embroidery on it. I actually made this one in 2008, Ellen Pankey. It has like the crazy quilt. It has a Mashantucket Pequot Native American nation that's here in Connecticut.
Mhm.
It has fans. It has beads. I'll show it like in halves.
Beautiful.
It
Look
has
at it.
velvet on it. It has buttons on it that came out of my grandmother's her sewing box.
Yep.
I actually have her machine. I'm sorry, Grandma. I have her industrial singer over there in the that's never ever ever been used. She bought it and she passed away before she ever used it. And then my mother gave it to me when I moved here, and I'm like, why did she give it to me before? I ain't got time to go over there and do it. And even some of the like the blanket stitching,
Yeah, I see that. That's beautiful. That is gorgeous.
this little
Re-
stuff. So yeah, I wanted to make a crazy quilt. It was supposed to be a full size. I had enough of that.
Okay. That's the last of the questions. The next question just going to have to do with your channel. Can you tell everybody what days you go live, if you go live, or when can they expect to see videos popping up on your channel?
Okay, it kind of died out in the middle, but I think you asked me about when I go live.
Mhm.
It's every Thursday, 4 p.m. Eastern time in the United States. And I talk about the Qaqortoq stuff, garden, quilt, and art traditions. It usually always has something, and sewing is my favorite genre. I call myself a fiber artist because I love whether it's crochet or knit or something. And I go live every Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern, but unfortunately, it's like the same exact time as you. And
The
if I could just,
Saturday one, if you go live at 6 your time on Saturday, mine starts an hour before that. No, 2 hours before that.
because I watch you a lot of times while I'm waiting to go
While you're
live.
waiting to start, yeah. So the
Yeah,
Thursday ones where we're both live at the same time.
yes. And could I show you one last
Yes,
thing
go ahead.
made out of fabric? These are batiks
Look.
and
Oh,
African fabrics. That's the back. This is the front. My sister bought me a gold
wow, that
plated
is
button,
great.
and
That
what this is clothesline rope that I zigzagged over, and it was very heavy. And then I trimmed it in real calf leather from an old coat or pair of pants or something. It has pockets in the inside. You can see that I don't use it. I just use it for
awesome.
show. And one of my favorite ways of making handle is to make jelly rolls, put some batting in it, and roll it up and braid it together. But I had forgotten how to braid hair because my daughter is probably your age, Katie, and I had to get somebody in North Carolina who had children with long hair or did their pony's tail
Yeah,
or horses to grooming to
yeah.
show me how to rebraid.
My husband braids my hair when he comes home because I can't braid my own hair.
It's too long, your shoulders.
Uh, it's like I have two left hands when I try to braid it, because I don't look when he. What it is I don't.
Oh,
I hate rubber bands. Like right now, and because when you put it in a ponytail up here all the time, it's uncomfortable, and my hair hasn't been cut in 2 years, I think, and so now it's down to my
this is
butt.
before the shutdown.
Yeah, so it's like when he comes home, please braid my hair, because
Oh,
then I get a break from the rubber band on my head, because he'll pull all of it back here and just braid it down the back of my head, because he's a fisherman, so he knows how to.
make
Um,
knots
all
and
I had
things.
to do was show him what I meant by braid because he didn't know Danish word for braid. So I showed him with some yarn, and he's like, "Oh, I know how to do that." And he's been so when he comes home for 2 months, my hair stays in braids, and then when he's gone, it's back to the same old boring ponytail.
By him being a sailor, they know lots of knots and nautical
Yep.
stuff.
Okay, so I want to thank everyone for when you do see our premiere. Thank you for coming, and thank you for coming to the interview. Don't hang up. And
Thank you for having me. I appreciate you asking me.
so I'm going to stop the record. So see everyone on the next video. Have a great week, and make sure to live, laugh, love, dream, and create something from all of that. Bye, everyone.